Welcome back to our series on Lightspeed Framework features. Today we will talk about the standard features that are built into our forms. We all use forms to manage the details of various entities, whether it is to add new data, modify existing data, or to review data. A well-planned form makes a big difference in user acceptance of any application. Let's log into the application and review the features related to forms in our framework. We have targeted our forms to be fully responsive, as that is the core requirement these days to build any new application. All our forms use the Bootstrap 5 12-column layout architecture. After working with various form control libraries over the last 2 decades, we have settled for Kendo UI components, as we have found their architecture very extensible and ease of migration with their future versions. These Kendo UI controls are 100% HTML5 components and work very nicely with all commonly used browsers. In order to cut down the development effort, we designed our solution to utilize a single form per entity for all operations, whether it is to add, edit, or show the details. Of course, if there is a need for separate forms, the framework very well supports that as well. Based on our experience, almost 80 to 90% of the entities can work with a single form for all their actions. We wanted to disconnect the forms from the model, so we followed the MVVM architecture, which made the forms totally independent from the database model by utilizing a view model. In addition, there can be multiple view models so that only the required data elements are shared with the respective form. The primary use case which comes to mind is the user profile form. There could be many attributes for a user account, but the user profile form may only require few of those attributes. Hence, by making the separate view model for the user profile form, you are able to hide data attributes which are not needed by the form. Please keep in mind that there are plenty of tools available that will expose the view model even if the fields are not shown on the form, so it's critical to make sure that the view models are not exposing any data. By using ViewModel, you can combine data from multiple models to be concatenated, which makes it possible to design more complex forms. As shown in this view, while adding a new user account, you can also select roles, which are stored in user account role model, but the view has combined them into a more unified layout. We have architected a modular design of the forms that utilizes the layout files, which allows us to keep the repeating components into their own sections, while entity level details are separated into their own individual files. By using this concept, the breadcrumb bar and the action bar are removed from the individual forms and are no longer repeated, unless needed for a specific use case. This allows us to change the breadcrumb bar and/or the action bar without touching each entity form. An example of this could be that if you need to move the action buttons from the top of the form to the bottom of the form, you just need to tweak the few layout files and they're ready to go. Very often, you start from a grid view of data where you might have narrowed down your data set and then open the forms for their desired actions. Our form architecture allows the original grid view to remain in place while users are interacting with the forms, and when the forms are closed, the original grid view with the same configuration is shown with updated data. The breadcrumb bar always provides you the full path which you have taken from the starting grid, and you can quickly go back by just interacting with the various hyperlinks in the breadcrumb bar. As you can see, various hyperlinks in the breadcrumb bar allows you to go one level up, two level up, or to the root grid at any time. Using the metadata, you can quickly configure the starting state of any form, whether they will open in full screen mode or modal pop-up mode. Even though it is possible to keep opening nested forms in a pop-up mode, keep in mind that each pop-up will be within the last pop-up window. We recommend not to exceed 3 levels of pop-up windows. As seen in this demo, you are viewing both options. In option number 1, we are opening each subsequent child form in a full screen mode. In option number 2, we are opening each subsequent child in a pop-up mode. Please note that you can change the configuration at runtime without any code change. When it comes to working with long forms based on their design, it is very important that the breadcrumb bar and the action buttons are always visible to the user to make them feel more in control. Our framework solved this requirement by making the breadcrumb bar and the action buttons stick to the top of the form, thereby providing access to them at all times. If the entity has related child records, the child tab as well as their grid data are dynamically loaded based on the configuration defined in the metadata and the security of the logged in user. As shared during the grids presentation, all detailed grids, whether they are at the parent level or the child level, are defined in the metadata and do not require any code in Visual Studio. Please note that when there are multiple related entities, the data is only loaded for the first entity that is visible to optimize the performance. One of the most commonly used controls that's expensive in terms of data is the Combobox control. It usually has a lot more details, especially all possible values, than what is shown on the forms. We have designed the Combobox controls data to be dynamic. To limit the number of details we need to load with the forms. Once the form is loaded and you interact with the control, our form architecture will communicate with the backend web methods using JSON to retrieve the relevant data on as-needed basis. You can review all the features of the Comboboxes in its own feature list in another video. As many forms have a need to attach documents, we have updated the process to save on time while uploading the documents. Our framework now allows for async file uploads with ability to upload multiple files by using drag and drop. This process allows files to be sent to the server as soon as they are dropped, and while users are still working on the form, the files are usually on the server before a user is ready to save the data. As our forms are built on standard .NET platform, you can use any third-party HTML component in forms with no limits. The process of integration will be the same as if you were building any standard application in Visual Studio. We are confident that you will be able to build efficient and responsive application forms using low-code development model of our framework. Based on our experience, the form architecture has cut down the development effort by at least 1/3 when compared to the traditional model of development. Thanks for watching, and we encourage you to watch other features of the Lightspeed framework. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.